Have you ever walked into a place where everyone stared at you like you didn't belong? Have you ever felt invisible? Not because you were quiet, but because someone decided your skin was too loud. Tonight, we step into that moment. A night when a black couple, Ava Jordan, a successful CEO, and her husband Malcolm were denied a simple dinner at one of New York's most luxurious restaurants. Not because they didn't have a reservation, not because they did anything wrong, but simply because of who they were. And here's the twist: what happens next will shake the very walls of that restaurant and reveal the heart of its owner in a way no one could have imagined. If you were Ava, standing there humiliated under the chandelier's cold light, would you walk away quietly, or would you stand your ground and force the world to look at itself in the mirror? What would you do if justice had a seat at your table, but you were told you couldn't sit? This isn't just a story about racism. It's about courage. It's about dignity, and about how one woman's silence or one decision can echo through an entire nation. Stay with me, because what happens next might just change the way you see humanity. If this story already touches something in you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Now, let's begin. The late autumn rain had just stopped. Small drops of water still lingered on Fifth Avenue, reflecting the pale yellow lights from the old buildings. The traffic still moved slowly, the red traffic lights blinking like the city's breathing. With soft jazz music playing from the bar across the street, a black Tesla Model S quietly stopped in front of Maison Lucente, Manhattan's most famous 2 Michelin-starred restaurant. Ava Jordan raised her head slightly and looked out the window. She saw her own silhouette faintly reflected in the lingering rain. Her navy dress fit her snugly, her small pearl earrings reflecting the soft light. A simple elegance, understated but confident. Ava touched her wrist a slim Cartier watch, a keepsake from her husband, Malcolm. The second hand moved silently. 7:46 p.m. She took a deep breath, not because of the cold, but because of the thrill she felt every time she entered a place that people had assumed was not for her. Malcolm leaned over, his voice warm. "Are you okay, Ava?" She smiled slightly. "Fine. It's just, every time I'm about to enter a place like this, I remember what my mother said. You can go anywhere, as long as you walk with your dignity." Malcolm smiled, his eyes soft but steady. "And I never forgot that." They got out of the car. The cool, damp autumn air enveloped them. A valet walked briskly up, his black coat still damp. He opened the door and said politely, "Good evening, sir and madam. Welcome to Maison Lucente." Ava nodded slightly, handed over the car keys, and walked with Malcolm across the wet red carpet in front of the restaurant. The dark wooden door opened, and the scent of lilies mixed with oak and old wine wafted in. Warm yellow light reflected off the marble floor. The clink of spoons and glasses echoed somewhere inside, the sound of people enjoying victory or power. Maison Lucente does not have a big sign. There is only a small bronze plate engraved with the words Maison Lucente. Since 1987 mounted on the wall. Those who know will come to find it. Ava paused for a moment. She looked up at the space before her, elegant, refined, and cold. There was something about the light that made one feel worthy to sit down. Malcolm gently touched her hand and whispered, "I told you, there is no one more worthy than you tonight." She chuckled, then let them see it. They walked to the reception desk. The young woman behind them, Nina Park, had her hair pulled back, light makeup, and a sharp-cut black uniform. A small name tag on her chest read, "Nina." She looked up, her smile quick and thin, like a practiced line. "Good evening, sir." "How may I help you?" Ava replied in a soft but clear voice. "I have a reservation for 2. Name is Jordan. 8 p.m. Nina looked down at the tablet screen. Her eyebrows furrowed slightly. "Please wait a moment." Ava felt the time drag. Behind her, a white couple entered, greeted with a much more cheerful tone. She heard Nina's voice change. "Welcome back, Mr. Thompson. Your table is ready." Ava swallowed, keeping her composure. Nina looked up. "Ah, it seems your table needs to verify a little more information." "Verify what?" Malcolm asked, his voice calm but firm. Nina smiled wryly. "It's just a small procedure. Please wait in the lobby for a few minutes." Ava pursed her lips. From the small earphone attached to Nina's ear, a man's voice softly said, "Code red at table 7. The hostess jerked slightly, then stepped aside. Ava heard every word. Code red. The word was unfamiliar, but the way it was said quickly, tensely, made her heart race. She turned to Malcolm. "What is code?" "Red." Malcolm shook his head slightly, his eyes downcast. "An insider term, but I'm afraid there's more to tonight than dinner." The atmosphere in the lobby seemed to freeze. A waiter walked quickly over, tall, with prematurely gray hair, a black vest, and a silver tie. Ethan Cole, Maison Lucent's head waiter. His eyes swept over the two of them, paused for a moment, then nodded politely, too politely. "Good evening. I'm Ethan. I heard there was a small problem with your reservation." Ava looked at him, her deep black eyes shining with determination. "No problem. I have the confirmation, the email, the deposit. I just want to sit at the table I reserved." Ethan chuckled. "I understand. But some of our tables need to be reconfirmed according to the new regulations." Malcolm narrowed his eyes. "Does that rule apply to all customers?" Ethan dodged. "I was just following instructions." In that moment, Ava saw herself in her early startup years when she was being snubbed in the boardroom for not looking like a CEO. She took a deep breath, relaxing her shoulders. "Okay, we'll wait. But I want to know exactly what I'm waiting for." Ethan was silent. Nina looked down. There was a heavy silence, as long as the rain outside. Ava put her bag down on the small table beside her, crossed her arms, and looked straight at the waiter. A flash of lightning came through the glass door, shining into the lobby, illuminating a small sign that read Maison Lucent. At that moment, Ava spoke softly, her voice calm but firm. "Sometimes, what needs to be verified isn't the customer. It's your own respect." Outside, the sound of car horns blared, mingling with the patter of rain. It seemed like a normal evening, but Ava had a feeling something was about to happen, something that would change more than dinner. Ava Jordan and Malcolm Reed stood in the lobby of Maison Lucent, amid warm light and cold stares. No one said anything else, only the ticking of the wall clock and the pattering of rain outside the window. In Ava's head, the words "Code Red at Table 7" still rang like an echo that she couldn't shake off. She'd heard a lot of strange terms in the corporate world, but Code Red in a fancy restaurant that had a different flavor. She closed her eyes for a second, then opened them, smiling slightly. A smile Malcolm knew well, the smile of someone who was fearless, just waiting for the other person to make the first mistake. "If they don't want to serve us, we can leave," he whispered, his voice low enough for her to hear. "There are hundreds of other places," Ava replied softly, her eyes still fixed on him. "No, Malcolm, I made a reservation here 3 months ago. Today is a celebration, not a surrender. The waiter, Ethan Cole, returned, his face trained to smile even when there was nothing to smile about. He spoke smoothly, as if reading from a familiar script. Mrs. Jordan, I'm afraid your table needs re-verification. Perhaps the system misclassified the customer, or there was a mistake in the deposit payment. Malcolm looked up, his voice low but clear. I paid, and I have the receipt in my email. Would you like to see it? Ethan looked a little embarrassed, but still maintained his composure. Of course, but we have our own procedures for the Crystal Lounge, a special area for VIP guests. Ava raised an eyebrow. And what is that procedure? Ethan spoke slowly, as if weighing each word. It is necessary to verify the ability to pay before serving. The words fell like heavy drops. Ava felt several eyes turn toward them. A young couple at the next table put down their knives and forks. Another waiter glanced up. Ava chuckled, but her voice was low and firm. You mean, you need to verify that we can afford to pay for our dinner? Ethan nodded, his eyes still calm. It's just the rules. Ma'am. Malcolm laughed, a dry, cold laugh. I used to teach commercial law. I never saw any regulation that classified customers by race. The atmosphere in the lobby was thick. Nina Park, the young hostess, stood silently in the back, her hand clutching the tablet. She looked at Ava, then at Ethan, as if in an internal struggle. Ava took a step toward the counter. Her voice was soft but powerful. I don't need anyone's permission to eat here. I just want to know. Why were the customers behind me invited in right away? While we had to stand here, Ethan didn't answer. He turned away, trying to make a call on his cell phone. In his earpiece, a voice said urgently, keep them in the lobby. Don't let them sit. Ava heard. She saw Malcolm's reaction. His eyes darkened, not with anger, but with disappointment. There are things, Ava, that people still don't learn, even after generations have passed, he said softly, his voice low and dangerously calm. Ava was silent. She looked around. The antique paintings on the walls, the gleaming crystal wine glasses, the bowing waiters who walked by. It was all refined, elegant, and emotionless. She had a picture of her mother, a woman who had been a nurse for 30 years in the Bronx, who had told her how she had walked through the snow to the hospital on her shift, forgotten by her white colleagues, because she didn't look trustworthy enough. Ava had thought the world was different, apparently, not as much as she had hoped. A white couple walked by. The man in the blue suit asked Nina softly, Is there a table available? Nina smiled. Yes, right away. They were led inside. Ava watched, her heart aching, but not with anger. She felt only sadness at how easily people forgot the most basic thing, respect. Malcolm put his hand on her back, a gentle touch, as if reminding her to stay calm. She turned to him, nodding slightly. I'm fine. Just then, the inner door opened. Light from the Crystal Lounge spilled out. Ethan stepped out, his face slightly tense. Ma'am, I'm afraid your table is currently unavailable. If you'd like, we can move you to the Sapphire Room. Same menu, but no deposit required. Malcolm chuckled. In other words, a less upscale area. Ethan did not reply. Ava took a deep breath, then spoke softly. Her voice as soft as a breath, but still enough to silence the entire hall. I have a reservation at the Crystal Lounge. I will be sitting at the Crystal Lounge. If you need to verify anything, you can do so after I finish eating. Nina looked up slightly, her eyes wavering. She seemed to want to say something, but Ethan glanced at her, his gaze silencing her. The atmosphere became so tense that every little sound was clearly audible. A waiter dropped a silver spoon. The sound rang out loudly and then died away. Ethan tried to keep his voice light. "I hope you understand. I was just following instructions." Ava tilted her head, looking straight at him. "And sometimes it's the people who just follow instructions that are the reason the world never changes." The words fell, slow and deep. Someone in the hall took a sharp breath. Malcolm opened his phone, opened the confirmation email, his voice calm. "Here is the reservation confirmation. Here is the deposit receipt. Do you want to see it?" Ethan looked over but didn't take it. He stepped back and spoke into the earpiece. Ava could see the worry in Nina's eyes. The hostess looked around, then down at her iPad screen. Suddenly, Ava heard the phone ringing from the bar. A woman's voice, clear and firm. "Excuse me, I've been watching this whole thing, and I'm recording." All eyes immediately turned to that direction. A woman with curly hair, holding her phone high. She looked straight at Ethan, her voice firm. "You're refusing to seat them. Right. With a confirmed reservation, Ethan Kung Kangoy. Ma'am, please put your phone away. This is private property. Private maybe, but discrimination isn't." The air seemed to shatter. Ava turned and recognized the woman Lena Ortiz, a freelance journalist she had met at a tech conference last year. Lena continued, this time addressing the camera, her voice clear. "We're live, folks. Upper East Side, Manhattan. A black couple with a confirmed reservation being denied seating. Watch this." Ava stood still, saying nothing. Malcolm crossed his arms. Ethan froze. Everything seemed to have shifted to another reality, one where every glance, every gesture was being watched by hundreds of people on screen. In that moment, Ava was no longer standing for herself. She was standing for everyone else who had been silenced in similar situations. Lena turned to her and asked softly, "Ava, do you have anything to say?" Ava raised her head, her voice calm. It's sad that in 2024 a dinner can still turn into a court session." The auditorium was dead silent. Outside, the rain was falling softly, and someone in the corner whispered, enough to be heard on the live stream, This is not going to end well." Ava didn't know if they were right or wrong. All she knew was one thing tonight. She wouldn't back down. The air in the Maison Lucent lobby seemed to thicken after Lena's "We're live." Folks rang out. The only sounds that could be heard were the rain tapping lightly on the glass windows and the faint heartbeats of the people standing there. Ethan Cole stood frozen, looking around. He knew the situation was spiraling out of control. A live stream in the middle of a fancy restaurant, this would spread faster than any apology. Ava Jordan stood still, the golden light reflecting off her face, reflecting in her deep, calm eyes. No anger, no screaming, just a terrifying calm. Her silence made those around her feel small. Malcolm Reed placed his hands on the counter, his voice low and clear. "Can you call the manager or someone higher up?" Ethan took a deep breath. "I'm the one in charge here." Lena chuckled. "That's great, because the internet is taking responsibility with you." Everyone in the lobby began to whisper. A middle-aged woman put down her glass of wine, her eyes full of annoyance. A young man took out his phone, pretending to check his messages but actually recording. No one wanted to get involved, but everyone wanted to witness. Ava turned to Lena and whispered, I don't need to live stream, Lena replied, her eyes still glued to her phone screen. I know, but some things only change when the light shines on them. Ava was silent. The words, so simple, reminded her of her father, who had been forced to resign from the police department for speaking out about injustice. The light is not always gentle, he had said, but it wakes you up. Ethan turned away, whispering into his headset, call the main office. Tell them to prepare for a public response if this video goes viral. Nina Park remained standing behind the counter, her hands shaking. She looked at Ava, then back at the tablet screen. A strange wave rose inside her, guilt mixed with fear. Since she started working at Maison Luçon, she had been taught how to smile, how to nod, how to handle sensitive situations. But no one had taught her what to do when that sensitive thing was her conscience. She swallowed, her voice trembling. Mrs. Jordan, I'm sorry. It's just, I have no say here. Ava turned, her voice soft. I understand. It's not your fault. But sometimes, silence is also an option. The words fell lightly, but Nina felt her heart tighten. She bit her lip, then looked down, as if to hide the shame rising in her heart. Malcolm looked at Ethan, his voice still calm. I know you have a process, but if that process is used to exclude, it is no longer a process. It is a barrier. Ethan turned back, his face red. I don't discriminate, sir. I'm just doing my job, Malcolm replied immediately, his voice low but sharp as a knife. And sometimes, the very way we do our jobs is the way we contribute to maintaining injustice. Ethan was silent. He had no answer for that. There was an empty space between them, full of things left unsaid. Outside, a car horn sounded, long and drawn out. Ava looked up through the window. The headlights swept across, reflecting her and Malcolm on the wall. Two figures standing side by side, steadfast and alone in the crowd. She thought back to that morning, standing in front of the mirror in her office, putting on her suit for the biggest contract signing of her career. You did it, Ava, Malcolm said, hugging her from behind. Tonight, we'll celebrate. She'd smiled, a genuine smile. And now, just hours later, here she stood, not to celebrate, but to prove that she was worthy enough to sit down. Ava took a deep breath, then looked straight at Ethan. I ask one last time, where is our table? Ethan glanced at Nina. She shook her head slightly, saying nothing. He exhaled, his voice weary. I'm sorry, but that table is already occupied. Lena immediately turned the phone back to him, her voice firm. Can you say that again? Ethan stiffened, his gaze wavering. I mean, they just arrived, and it's okay. Ava interrupted, her voice low. I understand. She bent down and picked up her bag. The action made Ethan sigh in relief, thinking she was going to leave. But Ava didn't turn around. She just stood up straight, looking straight into Lena's phone lens. If someone asked me what is the most tiring thing about being a black woman in America, this is it. Not the outright hate, but the way people smile when they take away your right to be normal. Her voice was not loud, but it carried clearly in the room. A few customers looked down, avoiding eye contact. A young waitress looked at Ava, tears in her eyes. Malcolm took a step forward and spoke slowly. I don't want to sue. I don't want to cause trouble. We just want to have dinner. But if that's so hard, maybe the problem isn't us. No one said anything. Ava turned to Lena, smiling slightly. Turn off the live stream. Okay, I don't want this to be just a video. I want them to remember this feeling. The feeling of someone being disrespected in the middle of what is supposed to be the most civilized place. Lena nodded, hung up, but kept her heavy gaze. Ethan stepped back, trying to say something. I'm sorry. I'll talk to the restaurant owner. Ava looked straight at him, her voice calm. You don't need to apologize to me. Apologize to yourself, because you've gotten used to doing wrong without realizing it. She turned away, taking Malcolm's hand. They walked slowly toward the door. Nina watched, her heart pounding. As Ava passed, she whispered so Ava could hear, I will not be silent again. Ava paused, turned around, and smiled. Good. Starting today. She left the hall, leaving behind a silence. An uncomfortable silence that no one wanted to keep, but no one dared to break. Ethan stood there, his eyes blank. He turned to Nina and whispered, You know, I've worked here for 10 years, and nothing like this has ever happened, Nina replied, her voice as soft as a breath. Maybe because until now, no one dared to say it. Ethan looked out the door, where Ava and Malcolm had disappeared into the rain. He felt a strange feeling, not regret, exactly, but fear that the world was changing, and he no longer knew whose side he stood on. Outside, the rain fell harder. The reflections of the car headlights on the wet stone floor were like streaks of memory. A waiter quietly pulled back the carpet in front of the door, wiping away the footprints of the two people who had just left. But in that dim light, there was still a small, undried, watermark something that time, no matter how much it passed, could not easily erase. The Manhattan night was thick with fog. Streetlights reflected off the wet pavement, creating long streaks of light like open wounds. The taxi carrying Ava and Malcolm left Maison Lucent, moving slowly through the traffic. They sat silently, neither of them speaking. There was only the steady sound of the wipers and the reflection of the lights through the windows. Malcolm looked out, his eyes heavy. He had been to court, argued with prosecutors in discrimination cases, seen black people treated worse because they didn't look like trustworthy people. But this was different. This time, it was Ava, the person he loved, the person he admired, the person who had made it all being treated like a criminal because of the color of her skin. He spoke first, his voice low. I'm sorry. Ava, I should have stopped you, kept you from going through that. Ava turned, shaking her head slightly, a faint smile playing at the corners of her lips. No, Malcolm, don't apologize. If I hadn't been there tonight, someone else would have been, maybe some young girl, without the strength to fight back, and they would still think it was okay. She leaned her head back, watching the lights outside the window gradually blur. We are used to being so strong that people think we can't be hurt. But the truth is, sometimes I just want to be a normal person. Malcolm was silent. He understood her. Ava wasn't just a strong woman. She was a symbol for so many in the tech industry, where black women are rarely taken for granted. She'd walked through so many closed doors, so many skeptical looks, so many, "Are you someone's assistant?" questions. And now, even as the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company, she had to prove what everyone else had assumed, that she deserved a seat at the table. The taxi stopped in front of the large glass building of Morrison Tech. The cold white light reflected off the sign. Ava looked up at her building, the one she had spent more than a decade building. She spoke softly, as if to herself. There are still many rooms in this world where people like us have not been invited. Maybe it is time for me to stop waiting for an invitation. Malcolm nodded, and started creating new rooms. Ava arrived early the next morning at the office. The morning light filtered through the glass, reflecting off the gleaming wooden desk. She opened her laptop, a barrage of emails and notifications appearing. The first subject line made her stop Video Maison Lucent Incident 250K views overnight. Her heart sank. She clicked on the link. The screen showed her from last night, standing in the middle of the restaurant lobby, the pale yellow light reflecting off her calm face. Her voice echoed, "It's not your fault, but silence is also an option." Below were thousands of comments. "She's so strong." "This is America in 2024. I've had this happen to me at another restaurant." Ava sighed. She hadn't meant for this to become a media storm, but it had. There was a light knock on the door. Her secretary, Grace Miller, appeared with a cup of hot coffee. "Miss Jordan, I think you should watch the news this morning." On the office television, the news was live. The anchor said in a calm voice, "A video shot at the Maison Lucent restaurant in Manhattan has been viewed more than 500,000 times in 12 hours. Online calls are being made for a boycott of the restaurant after an African-American couple was refused service despite having a valid reservation." Ethan Cole's image appeared, then the face of hostess Nina Park. The reporter's voice continued, "A restaurant representative said they are reviewing internal procedures. However, the public reaction seems to be getting more intense." Grace turned to Ava, looking worried. "Are you going to say anything?" Ava looked at the screen for a long moment. "Not now." Grace hesitated. "They are saying she is a woman of justice." Ava chuckled. "I don't need that title. I just want to have dinner like a normal person." Meanwhile, across town, Maison Lucent was on edge. Ethan Cole walked into the manager's office. Clara Hughes, a woman in her 40s, her face tense. "You know what happened?" Ethan asked. Clara nodded, her voice weary. "We're being attacked on social media. I just got a call from the head of the corporation." Ethan swallowed. "I didn't mean to. I was just following the rules." Clara smiled sadly. "Rules are never good enough when they hurt others." Ethan sat down, his head in his hands. "I just wanted to do the right thing, but now everything is falling apart." Clara was silent. She looked at him, her eyes filled with not only anger, but also regret. "Ethan, you know, sometimes doing the right thing is doing the wrong thing to people." In another corner, Nina Park sat in the break room, her eyes red. She opened her phone and saw the video being shared widely. She reread Ava's words. Silence is also an option. Her hands trembled. She remembered Ava's eyes last night, not angry, just sad and deep as the ocean. She pressed the record button. Her voice choked up. "I am an employee at Maison Lucent. What is in the video is real. There is no system error. They intentionally did not serve that customer." She hit send and posted it to her personal account. Within minutes, the post had been shared thousands of times. That afternoon, Ava received a text message from an unknown number. "This is Nina. I want to say I'm sorry, and I'm telling the truth." Ava looked at the screen, her heart warming. It was a small message, but it carried the weight of healing. That night, Ava sat alone in her apartment, by the window overlooking the city. The lights in the distance flickered, the rain still falling. She remembered what Malcolm had said that morning: create new rooms. Maybe that was what she had to do. The phone rang. It was someone she didn't expect. Ethan Cole. Ava hesitated for a moment, then picked up. Ethan's voice was low and hoarse. "Mrs. Jordan, I don't expect your forgiveness. But I have to say, I was wrong. I acted like the job was more important than people. And now I'm paying the price." Ava was silent, listening to him breathing heavily on the other end of the line. "I'm suspended, but maybe that's true. I just want you to know. I'll testify if there's an investigation," Ava replied slowly. "I don't need you to testify for me. I just hope you'll remember how it felt that day, and never let anyone else go through the same thing." Ethan didn't answer. Just slow breathing. "I understand. Thank you." The call ended. Ava put the phone down, leaned back in her chair, and closed her eyes. Outside, the rain mixed with the sounds of the city in a continuous melody. She knew the real storm was just beginning. 2 days after the incident, New York City was abuzz with a less than 3-minute video. The image of Ava Jordan standing in the lobby of Maison Lucent, her calm voice echoing over loud music, was played hundreds of times on the morning news. Every newspaper, from the New York Times to small blogs, carried the same headline: "Black CEO denied service at upscale Manhattan restaurant, video goes on fire." At the Morrison Tech office, Grace Miller rushed in, iPad in hand, her voice panting. "Ms. Jordan, it's live on national television. You should watch this." Ava raised her head, her eyes calm. "Grace, turn it on." The big screen showed a picture of a middle-aged white host with a clear voice. "We are talking about the incident at Maison Lucent, where an African-American couple was refused service. A witness, a restaurant employee, confirmed in a personal post that there was no system error. The restaurant is now facing its biggest boycott since the beginning of the year." On the screen, Nina Park appeared. She was answering an interview via video call, her face pale, but her eyes determined. "I can't keep quiet anymore. I saw what happened, and I know for sure that their table was still empty. I apologize for not doing the right thing at that time." Ava was silent for a few seconds. Something inside her felt like a wave of calm, a mixture of sympathy and sadness. Malcolm called, his voice echoing through the phone. "Ava, are you watching that girl? Nina is brave." Ava nodded, knowing he couldn't see. "I know. She chose not to be silent anymore. Sometimes, change starts with a word like that." The media storm spread like wildfire. Hashtags were everywhere. "Let us dine," Maison Lucent, Ava Jordan, celebrities, businessmen, and politicians voiced their support for Ava. Talk shows invited her to speak. She declined most of them, only accepting a special interview with the evening show The Real Truth Hour. As the cameras rolled, the host asked her in a gentle but serious voice, "Ava, what makes you choose to stay so calm when you are insulted?" Ava looked straight into the camera. "Because I don't want to let someone else's anger define me. They can take away my right to sit at the table, but they can't take away how I sit." The audience was silent for a few seconds. Then there was applause. The host nodded, his eyes filled with admiration. A very nice answer. "But do you believe that this can change anything?" Ava thought for a moment and then smiled slightly. "No one changes the world overnight. But if this story makes someone think twice before treating others, then I think it has had meaning." The interview ended, but the clip went viral. The comments below the video were like a continuous wave. This is the quality of a true leader. She doesn't just talk. She inspires. We need more people like Ava Jordan. Meanwhile, at Maison Lucent, the restaurant doors were unusually quiet. Temporarily closed for internal review signs were taped all over the facade. Ethan Cole sat in his empty office, his hands clasped together. He stared out the window at protesters holding signs reading "Equality for All" and "We See You." Ava, Clara Hughes, the restaurant manager, walked in, envelope in hand. "Ethan, they're officially firing you." Ethan nodded, his voice low. "I guess so." Clara put the envelope on the table. "I'm leaving too. I can't work for a place where human values are not respected." Ethan looked up, his eyes filled with regret. "Do you think they will forgive me?" Clara shook her head. "Forgiveness is not something they owe you, but you can do the right thing from now on." Outside, hundreds of people were still gathered. In the middle of the crowd, Lena Ortiz was live streaming. "Here's what a lot of people don't realize," she said, her voice strong. "No one wants to have to scream to get a meal. But when the silence is broken, we start to see what's really wrong with what seems like a perfect place." Ava sat in her office, watching Lena's live stream, then turned to Malcolm. "I didn't think it would go this far." Malcolm chuckled. "You speak the truth." "Ava, the truth is more powerful than you think." A moment later, Ava received an email from a stranger. "This is Marguerite Beaumont, president of Lumiere Holdings, the group that owns Maison Lucent. I want to meet you in person, not to justify myself, but to apologize." Ava read the email over and over again. The tone was strange, not the usual apologetic tone. She made an appointment to meet at the office the next day. When the door opened, Marguerite walked in, a white woman in her 60s, slim, with her silver hair tied back. Her face was exhausted. She paused for a few seconds, then said in a choked voice, "Ava Jordan. I saw the video, and I cried. I didn't think that kind of thing could happen in my own restaurant chain." Ava was silent, listening. Marguerite continued, "I have run Lumiere for 30 years, always proud of our standards, but those standards have only blinded us. I am not here to make excuses. I am here to take responsibility." Ava looked at her, her eyes softening. "What does responsibility mean to you?" Marguerite sighed, her voice shaking. "I will apologize publicly. And I want to set up a national training program for the service industry with you running it. If you like, I want to make amends, at least in part." Ava didn't speak right away. She looked at the woman in front of her, seeing not only regret but also sincerity in her eyes. After a moment, she nodded slightly. "If you're sincere, I'll help. But I don't want it to be just a media campaign. I want it to make real change." Marguerite squeezed her hand. "I promise." Outside the window, a light rain began to fall. Ava looked through the window, seeing the light reflecting off the pavement like fragile rays of hope. That evening, the media exploded once again. Marguerite Beaumont appeared at the press conference, standing next to Ava Jordan. She spoke slowly, each word clearly. "I apologize, not only for the incident at Maison Lucent, but for being silent for too long about the prejudices in our industry. Ava Jordan made me see what I should have seen years ago." The room was silent. Then there was applause. Ava stood beside her, needing no words. She knew that real change began in this moment, not in anger, but in awareness. The media storm has not stopped. But amid the chaos, something new is sprouting, the belief that kindness can prevail, if people dare to look at themselves. That night, Manhattan slowed down. The buildings lit up. The windows reflected yellow light. But in her small apartment west of Central Park, Marguerite Beaumont sat alone. Her tea cooled on the table. The wind blew through the crack in the door and mingled with the heavy breathing of a woman confronting her own conscience. On the television opposite, The evening news replayed the press conference. Images of herself and Ava Jordan, side by side, lit up the room. She looked into Ava's eyes in the video, calm, proud, and without a trace of hate. It made her heart clench. Marguerite used to be proud of the way she ran her Lumiere Holdings restaurant empire, more than 30 high-end restaurants across the United States, where she believed class is created by sophistication. But now, looking back, she realizes that the refinement she once worshipped was sometimes just a facade for privilege. She opened a desk drawer and took out an old photograph, a picture of her younger self, when she was just starting out. In it, she stood next to the black chef named Samuel, who had helped her start her first restaurant. Samuel was talented, creative, and loyal. But she remembered clearly the day a customer complained to him because he didn't want black people touching his food. Instead of defending him, she kept quiet. Samuel quit a few weeks later. Now the memory returned. Like a sharp knife, she whispered to herself, "Samuel, I should have done the right thing." A tear fell onto the photograph. In the dim light, Marguerite saw her own reflection for the first time, not the image of a powerful woman, but of a person who had let wrongs go unpunished for too long. The next morning, when Ava arrived at the Lumiere Holdings office, she found Marguerite standing by the large window, holding a cup of coffee, but not yet drinking it. She turned around, smiling weakly. "I couldn't sleep. Ava, I kept thinking about what you said yesterday, that change can't stop with an apology." Ava sat down, her voice soft but firm. "Yes, sorry's the beginning, not the end." Marguerite nodded, her eyes distant. "You know, I used to think I was a fair person. I hired people without discrimination, at least on paper. But when it happened in my own system, I realized that fairness is not without discrimination, but about facing injustice." Ava looked at her, a small smile on her lips. "You're facing it, and that's what matters most." Marguerite walked back to the desk and handed Ava a thick file. "I've spoken to the legal team. We're launching a new program, the Morrison Protocol, named after you. It will be the new standard for the hospitality industry. All employees must undergo cultural awareness and equity training before they can be licensed. I want you to help design it." Ava looked at the file, feeling both touched and confused. "You really want to do this? This is not an easy thing." Marguerite smiled, her eyes lighting up. "I spent my life building an empire. Now I want to spend the rest of my life repairing what it accidentally caused." The words echoed in the quiet space. Ava was silent, feeling something warm inside her. The next day, the kickoff meeting for the Morrison Protocol took place at Lumiere headquarters. The press crowded outside, flashbulbs blaring. Inside, Ava stood before the reporters, Marguerite at her side. "This isn't a PR campaign," Ava began, her voice clear. "This is a commitment. We don't want to make promises. We want to create new habits. Respect shouldn't be a rare virtue. It should be the baseline." The room was silent. Marguerite's voice trembled, but she spoke sincerely. "I used to think that the worst thing was to be hated. But no. The worst thing is to be indifferent. We will no longer be indifferent." After the meeting, when everyone had left, Marguerite and Ava stood alone in the large conference room. The afternoon light shone through the large windows, painting the room a soft orange-yellow. Marguerite turned, her voice soft. "Ava, do you ever get tired of always having to be the strong one, the one who represents justice, the one who brings hope to others?" Ava looked out the window, where the sun was slowly setting behind the tall buildings. "Yes, it's tiring, but I think There are battles that, even if you don't choose them, you still have to fight them to the end. Marguerite nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. She reminds me of Samuel. He once said, "Justice doesn't need to be given. It just needs someone to keep it." Ava smiled. "Well, you're keeping it now." They both smiled, soft but genuine. A smile that couldn't erase the past, but opened the door to a new future. In the evening, Ava returned home. Malcolm was waiting for her. A simple dinner on the table, pasta, red wine, and candles. He smiled. "This time, I'll make sure we get the right service." Ava laughed, her eyes shining with joy. "I believe you." They ate in silence, but it was a comfortable silence, something she hadn't felt in days. When dinner was over, Ava looked out the window. The rain had stopped, and the moonlight was shining down on the street. She touched Malcolm's arm lightly. "You know, sometimes justice doesn't come from the courts or the media. It comes from someone saying, 'I was wrong.'" Malcolm nodded, his voice low, and another replied, "I understand." Ava leaned her head on his shoulder and closed her eyes. In that moment, all the noise of the city faded away, leaving only the warmth of understanding. Something she believed was the root of true change. Across town, Marguerite stood by her office window. On her desk was an old photograph of Samuel. She placed it next to a new one of her and Ava at the press conference. She whispered, her voice breathy, "Thank you for giving me a second chance." A tear fell, rolling slowly down her cheek, reflecting the light. But this time, it was not a tear of guilt, but of awakening. A week after the press conference, America was divided. One side hailed Ava Jordan and Marguerite Beaumont as pioneers of social justice in the service industry. The other was outraged, saying they were making it a race issue and hurting the reputation of honest workers. Morning TV was abuzz with discussion, and social media was a battlefield. At the Morrison Tech office, Ava was scrolling through dozens of emails from other restaurants asking to join the Morrison Protocol Training Program. Grace Miller stood next to her voice a mixture of excitement and anxiety. "Ms. Jordan, over 20 businesses have signed up in 2 days. But at the same time, I just saw an article in the Daily Times. They're saying you're fair trading." Ava raised her head, her eyes calm. Fairness cannot be commercialized. It can only be taught. But people always fear what they do not understand. Grace nodded, but she saw the exhaustion flash across Ava's face. The pressure of the media, the tight schedule, and the attacks from people who had never met her, all of it was keeping her from getting a full night's sleep. Meanwhile, across town, Marguerite Beaumont faced the Lumiere Holdings Board of Shareholders. The meeting was held behind closed doors in a conference room on the 42nd floor, where the air was thick with tension. A silver-haired man, representing the main investment group, spoke coldly. "Mrs. Beaumont, your campaign has caused the company's stock to fall 12% in 2 weeks. We cannot continue to let you drag on this political risk." Marguerite sat up straight, her voice calm but firm. "If the stock price is the price we pay to make things right, I'm willing to pay it." The man raised his eyebrows. "You are letting emotions interfere with business." Marguerite looked straight at him. "No, I'm putting morality back in its proper place." The room was silent. A few bowed their head and saying nothing. They knew she would not back down. That afternoon, Ava received a text message from an unknown number. "Be careful. Someone is trying to discredit you." Before she could react, Malcolm walked in, his face stern. "Ava, you have to see this." On the television screen, A special news report had just aired. The host spoke in a serious tone. An anonymous source has revealed that Ava Jordan had invested in a fund linked to Lumiere Holdings before the incident. Some people are questioning whether the event at Maison Lucente was staged to promote this brand. Ava stood frozen, her lips pressed together, her heart sinking. Malcolm turned off the TV and looked at her. "They're trying to make me the one who took advantage." She took a deep breath, her voice hoarse. "I know, but I won't react now. If they want to fight with rumors, I'll fight with the truth." That night, Ava posted a short post on her personal social media, just 3 lines long. "No one needs to be staged to be humiliated. I didn't create this pain. I just won't be silent about it." The post was shared millions of times within hours. People who had experienced similar feelings shared their own stories. The hashtag #NotSilent was all over social media. The next morning, Ava got a call from Marguerite. Her voice was a little hoarse. "They're attacking you and me, but we're not stopping, okay?" Ava replied softly but firmly. "No, we've lit the fire. Now let its light shine through." Another evening, Marguerite called a meeting with the remaining Lumiere restaurant managers. The atmosphere in the large room was tense. A middle-aged man stood up, his voice harsh. "You're betraying us by doing this. We've held ourselves to high standards for years, and now you're making everyone think we're racists." Marguerite looked around, her eyes steady. "If your standards make others feel low, then they are not standards. They are arrogance." No one said anything else. A young Latino employee stood up. "I've been disrespected by customers because of my accent, but no one in the company has ever stood up for me." "Until you did, Ms. Beaumont. Thank you for making me believe that respect can exist here." The room was silent. Marguerite smiled slightly, feeling her hands tremble with emotion. The next day, Ava attended a forum at Columbia University. The topic: leadership and social responsibility in the new age. When she walked on stage, students chanted her name. A young student asked, "Aren't you afraid of becoming the center of controversy?" Ava looked straight at him, a small smile appearing at the corner of her lips. "I am scared, but silence is even scarier. Because when we are silent, we are complicit in wrongdoing." Applause resounded throughout the auditorium. As she leaves the stage, Ava receives a call from Grace. "Ms. Jordan, a media company wants to buy the copyright of the Morrison Protocol to broadcast as a TV show." Ava paused, thinking, "No, Grace, if they turn it into a show, the message is lost. We don't need a stage. We need to change reality." She hung up and stepped outside. It was a light rain in Manhattan at night. Droplets of water gathered on her coat, reflecting off the streetlights. Ava looked up at the sky, thinking about the journey. In the sound of the rain, she could hear the whispers of people no longer forced to be silent. Across the room, in an empty office, Marguerite received an email from a stranger. The first line simply read, "I am Samuel's son." She opened the letter and read slowly. "I saw your press conference. I don't know if you remember my father, but I know he will smile. Thank you for finally saying what he has been waiting for." Marguerite clutched the letter in her hands, tears falling. For the first time in years, she felt her heart forgiven not by someone else, but by herself. As for Ava, she came home late that night. Malcolm was waiting, 2 glasses of wine in his hand. He handed her one, smiling. "You know, no matter what they say out there, I still believe in you, because true justice isn't something you win. It's something you keep alive." Ava smiled, her eyes shining with emotion. "Thank you. I don't know where this will go, but I do know one thing. Every person who says I understand is a step forward for the world." The two clinked glasses, the small echo fading in the silence. Outside, the city was still bright. The storm had not passed, but Ava knew that. Amidst the undercurrent of reaction, there were rays of light beginning to appear. The New York night rained again. The lights from the buildings reflected off the puddles above, creating countless shimmering pieces of light. In the Morrison Tech office, Ava Jordan was the only one still sitting. The wind whistled through the windows. The rain pattered lightly on the glass like a rapid heartbeat. She looked at her computer screen. A series of anonymous emails poured in. Some of the headlines were chilling. "We know what you're hiding. Stop before it's too late." Ava leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. She had learned over the years to be calm under pressure, but this time it felt different. It wasn't just public opinion. It was someone trying to extinguish the light she had just lit. The door opened. Grace Miller walked in, her face worried. "Miss Jordan, I just found a new article. It seems to be from the same anonymous source as before." Ava raised her head. "Speak." Grace put the iPad down on the table, her voice trembling slightly. "They are spreading rumors that the Morrison Protocol is a money-making campaign, that she is receiving funding from corporations that are being sued for discrimination to clean up their image." Ava looked at the screen. On the news page, her picture was cropped with the logos of major corporations. Below were thousands of comments, fiercely divided. "This is an organized attack," she said softly. "They are afraid that we will actually make a difference." Grace squeezed his hand. "I think I know who's behind it. A large media company with a stake in Lumiere Holdings." Ava was silent. A fleeting thought change always has a price, and that price, sometimes, is honor. The next morning, Ava and Marguerite held a press conference to respond. They stood side by side, the lights of dozens of cameras shining on their faces. Marguerite began, her voice clear. "Someone is trying to twist the story, but the truth is simple. None of us were paid to do the right thing. We did it because it was the right thing to do." Ava continued, calm but strong. "When black women speak up, people say they're looking for attention. When people in power admit mistakes, people say they're acting. But the truth doesn't need to be believed. It just needs to be seen. And you all have seen it." The air in the room quieted. After the meeting, when the crowd had left, Marguerite sat back, looking at Ava. "They won't stop." "Ava?" Ava nodded slightly. "I know, but I won't stop." At the same time, in a building in Midtown, 3 men in suits sat around a conference table. One put down his newspaper, his voice cold as steel. "She's turning public opinion against us. The stock is down another 2%. If she continues, our entire employee training system will be under scrutiny." The second man sipped his coffee and spoke slowly. "Then we shut her up." The third, younger man lit a cigarette. "How she's an icon now." The first man smiled, his eyes cold. "The icon can also be brought down. Just need to make people doubt her honesty." That evening, Ava left the office late. As she walked out into the parking lot, she sensed someone was watching her. She turned around. No one was there, just the pale yellow light of the streetlights illuminating the sodden trees. She quickened her pace, her heart pounding. When she opened the car door, she noticed a white envelope on the windshield. Inside was only a typewritten note. "No one touches this system without paying the price. Ava clenched the paper in her hand and lit it in the ashtray. The flames flared, the paper curled up and burned to ashes. She whispered, "If they think I'll be scared, they're wrong." The next day, Ava held a live interview with journalist Lena Ortiz. The program was broadcast on an online video platform, with more than 1 million viewers watching live. Lena asked her frankly, "Ava, many people say you are creating too strong a movement, making service workers feel blamed." "What do you think?" Ava looks into the camera, her voice low but powerful. "I don't want anyone to blame. I just want them to look at me and ask, am I being fair? Change is not an accusation. It's an opportunity to do better." Lena nodded, smiling slightly. "And aren't you afraid of what will happen if the forces behind it feel threatened?" Ava replied slowly. "If justice makes someone feel threatened, then perhaps they should ask themselves why." The quote spread like wildfire across social media. In just 24 hours, the interview clip reached 10 million views. Thousands of people commented, "Justice doesn't need screams. It just needs people who dare to speak." In the darkness of the tall building, the man who had been smoking the day before looked at his phone screen and smiled faintly. "She's really good," he said with disdain, "but everyone has their weaknesses." A few days later, Grace walked into Ava's office in a panic. "Ms. Jordan." They hacked the internal system. All the documents from the Morrison Protocol project were posted online. Ava stood up, eyes wide. What Grace nodded, her voice choked. "And they're editing it to show we agreed to take money from the corporations being sued." Ava was silent, her hands clenching. She knew this was the most dangerous move, making people doubt her innocence. She looked at Grace and spoke slowly. "Prepare a press conference. I'll call Marguerite. We'll tell the whole truth." The press conference took place that evening, in a room packed with reporters. Flashbulbs were flashing. Ava stepped up to the podium, her face impassive. "Yes, our system was hacked. But I don't regret starting the Morrison Protocol. If fairness makes someone feel so threatened that they resort to hacking and slander, then that just proves the fairness is more necessary than ever." The room was silent. Marguerite stepped forward and put her hand on her shoulder. "I used to be afraid of the truth. Now I have learned that fear does not save honor. Only courage can." Below, the reporters fell silent. A few bent over, typing rapidly on their computers. Outside, hundreds of people gathered in front of the building, holding up signs that read, "We stand with Ava." As she walked out of the hall, Ava saw a brown-skinned girl about 10 years old standing with her mother, holding a hand-scrawled sign that read, "Thank you for not being scared." Ava bent down and smiled gently. "Don't be afraid." The girl nodded, her eyes shining. In that moment, Ava knew whatever dark forces were working against her, the light was spreading, from person to person, silently but persistently. And sometimes, just one person standing up is enough to make the whole world start thinking again. The city never sleeps, but tonight, it seemed as if all of New York held its breath. LED billboards in Times Square showed Ava Jordan not her usual beaming smile, but a poorly cropped photo, accompanied by the bright red text, "Hero or Hypocrite," in her small apartment. Ava sat quietly on the chair, holding the remote control, the light from the television screen shining on her face. The announcer's voice rang out evenly. According to new sources, Ava Jordan and Marguerite Beaumont are facing an official investigation by the Federal Trade Commission, related to suspicions of media manipulation for image gain. Malcolm walked in, his face tense. Ava, you don't need to watch anymore. They're just trying to kill your spirit. Ava looked at him, her eyes dark. I know, but if we're scared, they win. She stood up and walked out onto the balcony. The lights of New York were still bright below, but inside her everything was hazy. She remembered that first night at Maison Luçon where it all began. A meal, a rejection, and now the whole country was arguing about her. The phone rang. It was Marguerite. Her voice was hoarse, but firm. Ava, I just received a summons. They want to check all the documents between you and me. Me too, Ava replied calmly, but we have nothing to hide. Marguerite was silent for a few seconds. I have lived long enough to know that the truth does not always win immediately, but if you hold on to it, it will outlast a lie. Ava smiled slightly. I believe you. The next day, Ava entered the Federal Commission building. She was surrounded by reporters, hundreds of questions flying like a storm. Cameras flashed. Microphones pointed at her. Ava, do you admit to exploiting public sympathy to improve your reputation? Ava, did you receive hidden funding from Lumiere Holdings, Ava? Do you think you have caused social division? She paused for a moment, turned her head, her eyes calm. I just think that real division begins the moment people become silent in the face of injustice. That statement made the crowd silent for a few seconds. Then a series of cameras flashed again. Inside the hearing room, the atmosphere was heavy. A long row of chairs, solemn officials, and across from Ava and Marguerite. The chairman held a thick file, his voice even. You are both accused of exploiting your public image for personal gain. Ms. Jordan, do you have anything to say? Ava took a deep breath. I don't make money off anyone's pain. I just want to make sure no one else has to go through what I went through. If that's a crime, I'm guilty. For a moment, the room fell silent. Marguerite placed her hands on the table and added, If anyone is responsible, it is me. I am the one who has allowed injustice to persist in my system for so long, and I am willing to be investigated to the end. The chairman looked at them, his eyes softening. He nodded slightly, then spoke slowly. We will consider it carefully. Thank you for your cooperation. As they stepped out of the building, it was pouring rain. No one spoke, just the sound of the rain, washing away the dust of the long, tiring day. Ava looked up, letting the cold drops touch her skin. She closed her eyes, as if washing away her own fear. That night, Marguerite called her, Ava, I just received news. One of the 3 people behind the media campaign against us has been arrested for bribing media officials. Ava sat up. Are you serious? There is evidence. And interestingly, they found documents that showed the entire smear campaign was funded by an investment group that had opposed the Morrison Protocol. Ava was silent. In her heart, a small ray of light crept through the darkness. The next day, the morning news headlined, New evidence reveals media conspiracy against Ava Jordan. The internet erupted in a new wave of emotion. Many who had doubted apologized. The hashtag #WeStandWithAva was back on top. At the office, Grace walked in, holding a printed copy of the news. Miss Jordan, they cleared you, but I'm still worried. They'll try something else. Ava smiled, her voice low. Maybe, but now they know I won't back down. And once the truth is out there, no one can put it out. In the evening, Ava was invited back to the Real Truth Hour. The host, this time, open with an emotional voice. "Ava, you have been through a fierce attack, but you are still standing. Do you think you have won?" Ava chuckled. "No, I don't think so. I don't fight to win. I fight so those who come after me don't have to." The studio audience stood up and applauded. Some people cried. On the way back, Ava looked out the car window, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. Malcolm held her hand, his voice as light as the wind. "You have walked through the darkness, Ava?" She smiled. "No, dear. I only bring light in the darkness." Across town, Marguerite sat in her empty office, staring out at the night sky. She received an email from a stranger Samuel's son. "I saw the news today. You've proven that change is real. My father used to say, no one can erase the past, but anyone can use the present to rewrite it. Thank you for doing that." She placed her hand on her chest and closed her eyes. At 62, she had never felt so light. That night, Ava sat at her desk, turned on her computer, and typed the first lines of her new book, the title, "The Table We All Deserve." She wrote slowly, the voice in her head as if talking to herself sometimes. Darkness does not come to destroy the light. It only comes to test how long we dare to hold on to that light. She paused. Looking out the window, dawn was breaking. The first light filtered through the buildings, into the room, reflecting on her calm face. And in that moment, Ava knew this wasn't the end. This was just the first dawn. After a long night of the world learning to love again. 3 months after the investigation concluded, America has become familiar with 2 names, Ava Jordan and the Morrison Protocol. The once smeared story has become the subject of hundreds of seminars, training sessions, and even national television. In many restaurants, hotels, and cafes, small brass plaques are mounted near the entrances, engraved with the words "Certified by the Morrison Protocol Dignity for All." That morning, Ava stood in the Grand Hall of the National Convention Center in Washington, D.C. Thousands gathered for the launch of the National Training Program. Reporters crowded below. When the stage lights came up, Ava stepped onto the podium, wearing a light gray suit, her voice deep and warm. "I never thought a refused meal could lead to a journey like this. But sometimes it is from the smallest hurts that we learn the greatest, that dignity is not a gift someone gives us, but something we must preserve for each other." The room was dead silent. Her every word seemed to resonate with the air, lingering, touching the hearts of the listeners. Ava looked around, faces of all races, from white, black, Asian, Latino, Middle Eastern, all standing under one roof. She smiled and continued. "The Morrison Protocol is more than just a show. It's a reminder that when we serve someone, we do more than just bring food or service to their table. We bring respect. And respect is the only common language the world truly understands." Applause broke out. Flashbulbs flashed like shooting stars. Marguerite sat in the front row, tears streaming down her face. She knew the journey would not be easy. But in that moment, she felt all the sacrifices were worth it. After the ceremony, a young reporter approached. "Ms. Jordan, do you think the Morrison Protocol will change society?" Ava smiled gently, her voice slow. "I don't think a program can change the world, but I believe people can. And if each person changes just a little, the world will change more than we think." Outside, the D.C. sun was mild. The wind carried the scent of coffee from the small cafe at the end of the street. Ava left the center and walked through the crowd, recognizing glances, friendly smiles, silent nods, all of it a warm energy that spread around her. Meanwhile, in New Orleans, A small restaurant hung a sign that said, "Everyone welcome." The owner, a middle-aged white woman, turned to her new employee, a young black man. "We've just been certified under the Morrison Protocol." "What does that mean?" "Do you know?" The young man smiled sheepishly. "It means everyone is treated with equal respect." "Exactly," she replied, smiling. "And we start by greeting our guests with genuine eye contact." The scene appeared on the news the next evening, becoming an iconic image for the movement. In New York, Marguerite pulled up the photo of her and Ava from the show's premiere. She smiled, then turned to the door when there was a light knock. It was Ethan Cole, the former manager of Maison Lucent. He was dressed casually, holding an envelope. "I came to thank you, Mrs. Beaumont. I got a new job. The restaurant just got Morrison Protocol certified. They said I should come in for my first training." Marguerite nodded, her eyes shining with joy. "I'm happy for you, Ethan. Everyone deserves a second chance." Ethan bowed his head. "I also want to send you this." He placed the envelope on the table and left. When he opened it, there was a handwritten card inside. "I have learned that an apology is only as good as an action. Thank you for giving me the chance to make things right." Marguerite sat silently, her eyes filled with tears. That night, Ava flew back to New York. The plane glided through purple clouds, the sunset streaking across the sky. Malcolm sat next to her, gently holding her hand. "You realize, it all started with one dinner, and now it's become a movement." Ava looked out the window and smiled. "I noticed, but what moved me most was not the scale of it, but the people who had changed." "Are you thinking about Marguerite?" Malcolm asked. "She, and Ethan, and Nina, they all dared to look back at me. That was the hardest thing. When the plane landed." Ava opened her phone to find hundreds of messages from all over: students, waiters, restaurant managers, people telling their own stories. One girl wrote, "I used to be afraid to apply for a job because of the color of my skin. Now I feel more confident because of people like you. Another thank you for making me look at how I treat others every day." She read each line, feeling an indescribable feeling, both grateful and humble. The next day, Ava went to Maison Lucent, where it all began. The restaurant had reopened after a complete makeover. No more cold lighting or aloof staff. Everything was warm and welcoming. When she walked in, the new manager, a woman of Asian descent, smiled and said, "Welcome back to Maison Lucent, Ms. Jordan. Table 7's ready for you today." Ava laughed, her eyes shining with emotion. "Thank you. I think I've been waiting for this invitation for a long time." She sat down and ordered a glass of red wine. The warm light reflected off the glass, recalling that first night. But this time, there was no pain, only peace. Marguerite appeared a few minutes later, dressed in a simple cream-colored dress. She sat opposite, smiling slightly. "I thought it would be meaningful if we ended our journey exactly where it all began." Ava nodded. "I think so. And maybe this isn't the end. Just a dinner. After the storm." The two raised their glasses. No words were needed. Everything was said in the silence of understanding. In another small corner, Lena Ortiz was filming the moment for an upcoming documentary. She whispered into the microphone, "This is not a story about racism. This is a story about two people who did the right thing. And because of that, the world learned to be a little gentler." When the video aired, it immediately went viral. In the comments section, millions of people wrote the same line: "Be kind, be better, be human." Ava watched the video in her apartment. She leaned her head on Malcolm's shoulder and said softly, "I think light always has a way of spreading, as long as we don't turn it off," Malcolm replied, smiling warmly, "and you are that light." "Ava." She said nothing, just looked out the window. It was dusk, the city lights twinkling like 1,000 stars. She closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of hope spread through her heart. Because sometimes the greatest thing a person can do is just to keep their heart kind. It was a sunny morning in New York. The light filtered through the tall windows of the glass tower, casting a soft yellow on the floor. Ava Jordan sat in her 42nd floor office, looking down at the bustling crowd below. Everything had changed. Gone were the biased articles. Gone were the skeptical stares. Instead, there was a society learning to understand, to listen, and to respect. She put down her coffee and opened a new folder on her computer. The subject line read, "The Morrison Dignity Foundation Phase 2." She smiled. Each word, each line, was more than a plan. It was a dream in progress. Marguerite entered, holding a bouquet of white roses. "I thought you needed a little freshness for this morning." Ava looked up, smiling gently. "Thank you, but I should be the one giving you the flowers." Marguerite sat down, her eyes shining with rare joy. "No, Ava, I've had enough. You know, I just got a call from the National Restaurant Board. They want to make the Morrison Protocol a mandatory standard for the entire industry." Ava paused, her heart stopping. "You mean every restaurant in America?" "Yes. And they want you to speak at the signing ceremony next month." Ava was speechless. In that moment, all the old memories came flooding back from that rainy night. The waiter's contemptuous gaze, the cold silence in the fancy restaurant, to the millions of people who spoke up later. It all seemed to come full circle. That afternoon, Ava returned to her Manhattan apartment. She opened the window, letting in a spring breeze, carrying the scent of flowers from the park below. Malcolm was cooking dinner in the kitchen, soft jazz playing. He looked up and smiled. "You're home. I'm making your favorite pasta." Ava came over and leaned her head on his shoulder. "They want to make the Morrison Protocol the national standard." Malcolm stopped and turned to look at her. "You did it, Ava. You changed the system." Ava smiled, her eyes distant. "No, I just light a candle. You guys carry it around." Dinner was quiet. Afterwards, she opened her laptop and checked emails from around the world, from a restaurant in Tokyo, a hotel in London, a chain of coffee shops in Johannesburg. All were using the Morrison Protocol. She read each thank you note, each post from strangers, yet familiar. A new message popped up. It was from Lena Ortiz. "I just finished the documentary, The Table We Deserve. It comes out next week. I thought you might want to check it out. Thank you for making me believe in good things." Ava clicked on. The screen showed her in her first interview, her eyes still angry, her voice still shaking. Then the video cut to a series of servers, managers, customers of all colors telling their stories. "I used to think that if someone was mean, they were poor," a server said. "Now I understand that everyone deserves to be treated with respect." A middle-aged white man burst into tears. "I was Brandon, the guy in the first story, and I'm sorry." Ava stared, her throat tight. Malcolm sat down next to her, gently placing his hand on her shoulder. As the screen cut to the final scene, Maison Lucent lit up. Customers laughing. Staff greeting with friendly eyes, a line appeared. "For those who have been overlooked. For those who dare to stand up." Tears rolled down Ava's cheeks. Not tears of pain, but of relief. She whispered, "Finally." We're sitting at the same table, a week later, at the signing ceremony. Ava stepped up to the podium. Behind her was a large sign that read, "National Standard of Dignity in Hospitality, the Morrison Protocol." She looked out at the room, hundreds of journalists, thousands of attendees. She took a deep breath, then spoke. "I used to believe that justice was something we had to demand. But now I understand that justice is something we have to build together. A table is only complete when everyone has a seat. And today, we are building that table." The applause was long. Marguerite was in tears, and Grace stood below, smiling proudly. Lena was live-streaming the moment, and millions were watching. After the ceremony, Ava stepped outside. Dusk was falling over D.C., the last rays of sunlight streaking the horizon like golden threads. She walked along the tree line, stopped at a bench, and stared into the distance. A young woman approached, looking embarrassed. "Ms. Jordan, I just wanted to say thank you. Because of you, I had the courage to apply for the manager position. They chose me, and I was the first black woman in that position in the chain." Ava smiled slightly, placing her hand on the girl's shoulder. "Remember, you don't need anyone's permission to shine. You just don't need to apologize for shining." The girl hugged her, sobbing. Ava patted her shoulder, feeling her heart warm. That evening, Ava sat alone in her apartment, looking out at the glittering city. She opened an old notebook. The first page was scribbled in her handwriting. "Lumière Noire, 8:30 p.m. reservation for Morrison." She laughed. It all started here. She took a pen and added at the bottom of the page, "No one is born to serve or to be served. We are born to share, to sit at the same table where we all deserve to be." As she put down her pen, moonlight streamed through the window and onto the table. Everything was so peaceful. Lena Ortiz's voice was heard in the recap video that aired on television that night. Sometimes history is not written in battles, but in small actions like one woman who refused to leave her seat. And in doing so, she made the whole world look at the table they were sitting at. The screen faded to reveal Ava Jordan walking out of Maison Lucent, looking up at the night sky. The background music played, soft and steady, and the final line appears, "Be the person who refuses to move until everyone has a seat. Be the person who refuses to leave until everyone has a seat." Ava Jordan's story is more than just a denied meal. It's the story of millions of people who have been overlooked, judged, or marginalized because of their background, skin color, or past. It reminds us that dignity is not a given, but a birthright that no one can take away. Ava didn't fight with anger. She chose to fight with determination, compassion, and calmness. That's how she won, not with a scream, but with the power of truth and kindness. In life, each of us will encounter our own restaurants where our self-esteem is tested, misunderstood, and rejected. Remember, it's not how others see us that makes us who we are, but how we respond to them. Sometimes, the biggest change starts with one small choice: choosing kindness, when the world chooses cold. And as Ava proves, as long as one person holds the light, the darkness never wins. Thank you for listening to this story. If you feel moved or find a part of yourself in it, please like, share this video, and subscribe to the channel to help us spread stories that touch hearts and inspire faith in humanity